Hi everyone, I'm back one more time. It is dark outside. See, dark. And I am finally coming around to the last video of the night. If I look tired, it's because I am. I'm teaching 20 units, and did I mention I have 7 kids? The 24-year-old moved out, the 25-year-old moved in, the 12-year-old went back to her room, the 25-year-old took the old room. So we have been moving furniture all day since I last saw you. So I am tired. Plus there was dinner and Monday night football that I had to make snacks for, and there's about 10 loads of laundry. So if that sounds familiar, that's my life too. And now I'm sitting in my office while everyone's doing jigsaw puzzles and watching football, and we're going to talk types of poetry. So here we go. You have several documents to download about types of poetry. One is a complete list, and it describes all of the poem types, the definitions, and gives some examples. And the second one says types of poetry, and it only gives you a few, but these are a few that I handpicked to really demonstrate not just the diversity, but the difficulty level of these poems. So hopefully you've downloaded it or picked up your packet, and I'm looking at types of poems, and what I would encourage you to do with highlighter, with pen, take notes. I'm only going to demonstrate a couple of these, but I want you to go through them all and really get an appreciation, not just for how it sounds, but for how these things are built. So there are 3 kinds of terminology that you need to be familiar with. The first is closed form, and that is a traditional poem that follows a strict pattern of structure, procedure, meter, oftentimes, and format. To be considered a closed form poem, you have to be predictable, you have to follow the rules of the poem type, and there's not a lot of wiggle room, okay? The second kind is called open form. And an open form poem has form. It has rhyme, it has alliteration, it has stanzas, it might have a meter, but it is not predictable and it is not in a repeated pattern. So this is called open form. Now, a poem that has just chaos, maybe no meter, it's a flow of consciousness, or there's no rhyme scheme. This one is called free verse. And we're not going to look at a lot of free verse poems right now. We'll get to some later. But you do need to know these 3 terms, and you need to be able to identify the differences. Now, there's one more poetry type. I believe it's introduced in the very last chapter, and that's called concrete poetry. And we are going to look at a concrete poem example, I think, in week 5 or so. But concrete poetry is when the poem itself takes on the form of an abstract object. So it might look like a woman, or it might look like a building, or maybe the spatial typography is crazy and it looks like raindrops or something like this. So when the writer mixes art and poetic form, you've got something called concrete poetry, and that is a term on your exam. Now, the thing about all poetry, it doesn't matter, is that they all speak to the human condition, okay? We've got levels. How does it look? How does it sound? How does it feel? What does it mean? And at the end of the day, it always says something about the human condition. It says something about tragedy or triumph or courage or fear or anger or love, forgiveness, all of these attributes that make us human. That's what poetry is about. That's the human emotion that the art form is intended to tap into. A poem should move you to some kind of reaction. And if it doesn't move you to a reaction, it's not the poem's fault. It typically is that the reader is not doing enough work. The second thing about a good poem is that even if you don't understand it, you can appreciate its complexity and its structure, and always you should be able to find an application. So I want to start with the very simple one, haiku. It got trashed a little bit in the discussion board. The haiku poem, and you can follow along with me, has 3 lines and 17 syllables. This is a Japanese verse and 3 lines of 5, 7, 5 syllables, often depicting an image. Haiku poetry began 1,000 years ago in Japan. It does not have to rhyme, but it does have to follow a certain pattern of numbers, of lines, and syllables. Titles are subtle, but the poem always describes something about nature. Sensory details are important, and it must be written in present tense. So those are the rules to haiku poetry. Now, if you're following along on your document, hopefully you printed it out. Line 1 has 5 syllables, line 2 has 7 syllables, and line 3 has 5 syllables. And here's the example I give. Now, if we were in the classroom, y'all would be reading these examples, and we would be dissecting this together. In fact, all of the discussion boards work on Canvas, we would be doing together in real time, not for a grade, but for participation. So I have a poem here by Caroline O'Connor. It's called Winter, and this is how it reads. Winter, an icy wind blows. Its trees, lonely and cold, its branches are bare. Now, that's the poem. That's a haiku. Let's just take a look at it on the surface level, shall we? Is it about something in image, in nature? Yeah, it's about winter and a tree, okay? Is it written in present tense? Yes, icy wind blows, that's present progressive. Tree is lonely, that's present. So we have that. Now we say 3 lines. Does it have 3 lines? Yes, it has 3 lines. Blows, cold, and bare. Everyone see where I'm at? Now the lines have to have 5, 7, and 5 syllables. So let's look at number 1. An icy wind blows. Go ahead and write number 5. The tree is lonely and cold. That's 7. Go ahead and write a 7. Its branches are bare. And that is 5. Oh my gosh, we've got that part down too. Now, it's not just about the syllables, but it's also about then, what does it mean? So we know that we have a haiku because it follows the rules. This is closed form, traditional poetry. But what does it mean? And that's a real big question. So we could take it at the surface level, tree outside, winter time, there's ice and wind. But the poem gives us more. Do you see any personification in here? The answer is lonely, right? The tree is lonely. Lonely is a human condition. I say, okay, lonely. Is there another word that kind of sounds, like it has a human root? And it might be bare. Bare has a root as barren. And then I think, wow, this might be about a female, actually. An icy wind blows. Have you ever gotten some really crazy bad news and it's like an icy wind blows? The tree is lonely and cold. Lost, alone, isolated, in grief, sadness, worry. Its branches are bare. Now this might be barren from the loss of a child. This might be unable to ever conceive and your womb is cold and icy. But everybody goes through a winter, don't we? We all experience it. We all experience the cold, dark news of bad news. We all experience being lonely and cold, both figuratively and literally. And we all have had moments when our branches were empty. We have nothing to offer. We're barely standing up. And so this is a haiku. It's speaking not just about the outside, but it's speaking about the inside. It's speaking about me. And that's the beauty of poetry. You're supposed to be able to find that. Now, I walked you through quatrain. I walked you through cinquin. I walked you through the damente. I walked you through couplets. The next one I want to go talk to you about is the limerick. It's a crazy, amazing, difficult poem. Oh, no.